All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is the ancient Greeks and how their form of government, democracy, ended up being what we use today. But first, we need to talk about what the expectations are. Now, the expectations are that you will sit here and listen. I'm going to talk for a little bit, so that'll be all right. But you have worksheets in front of you. You need to fill those out. If you have any questions about the worksheets, you can feel free to ask me. Raise your hand, ask a question. But at the end of class, we are going to have a quiz. It's a little 10-point quiz. It's not going for a grade, but it's not going to be a grade. It's going to be a 10 or a 0. If you don't take it, it's a 0. If you take it, it's a 10. But you have to pass it with an 80% or more, and you can take it as many times as you want in the 15 minutes at the end of class. And you also can use your notes on that. So, ancient Greece. Now, they we've already talked about the geography of Greece and how it's basically just a small island, or it's a small country that's in the middle of the Mediterranean with a mess of little islands around, but they all were the same type of people. Now, to understand how a democracy and a direct democracy, or a representative democracy and a direct democracy work, you first have to understand city states. Now, a city state, is basically just a city that itself is governing that and the land around it. Later on in the history of the world, after ancient Greece had fallen and all that, feudalism or castles and kings and lords, that's the same type of idea as a city state, but a city state means that you have one city and it rules the area around it, and you have another city over here that rules the area around it. Now, these two cities, they might be the same type of people, but they are also different in that they live in or around these two different cities. It's kind of like saying that Chicago and Kansas City were saying if they were city states, they would be two completely different governments that are up here in Chicago and down here in Kansas City, and the areas around them would be ruled by these cities. Now, ask yourself, are people from Kansas City and people from Chicago really that different? No, not really. They're pretty much the same. They're both Americans and they're both that. But in this scenario, they would be from Kansas City and from Chicago, so they would be different. That's how a city state works. Now, the two city states that everyone knows in Greece were Athens and Sparta. Sparta was in the south, Athens was along the northern coastline, and they both were Greek, but they were both Greek, but they were both um, different city states, and they warred with each other, and they warred with other clans and everything. But what? So you have these cities. We'll focus on Athens. You have these cities, and these cities grow to a decently big, large city, and they now have to govern themselves. So they have to make laws and everything. So the people in Athens, Athenians, was what they were called, decided that they were going to create this new government, and it was going to be a government in which everybody had a say. Everybody had a say. So it was called democracy, or it was called a direct democracy. Now, what a direct democracy is you have every single person gets a vote. So if the United States was a direct democracy, all 450 million U.S. citizens would get a vote, and they would tally all those up, and they would pick the winner. That's how it would work. Now, a representative democracy, which came later on in the Grecian ancient times,